I think, what if you wake up every morning and you're just glad to be alive? And that's still the case for me. I wake up every morning and I'm really just glad to be alive, which means I have another day to do good work.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Ginger Kamalesh Hooven. As director of Mount Madonna Institute's Ayurveda Yoga Therapy Program and chair of the organization's School of Yoga, Ginger has been integrating the sister sciences for decades. She began her yoga journey in Guatemala, where she opened the first yoga studio in Antigua Guatemala in 2000. She spent most of her time from 2002 to 2014 living off and on in the yoga community of Mount Madonna Center in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California, where she studied with Master Yogi Baba Haridas. Today she works for Mount Madonna Institute virtually while living in Guatemala, where she has an Ayurveda yoga therapy practice and teaches regular classes. Ginger follows the advice of her teacher, Baba Haridas, to know yoga through Ayurveda. She has been a restaurateur in Guatemala since 1993, where she also owns and runs a mini retreat center in San Juan del Obispo, just outside of Antigua. Hi, Ginger, Kamalesh.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here with you, having this conversation with you, and while you're in the mountains of Guatemala, which sounds
I'm
very
sitting on a
nice.
volcano, to be exact.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I envy that now. I'm joking. But yeah, it's good to know that this works, that we can have this conversation while you're there in Guatemala. So, but I am looking forward to this conversation. As we're sitting here smiling, I anticipate that it will be a fun conversation to have with you. By the way, everyone, Kamalesh is one of my teachers in yoga. I did study at Mount Madonna Center, and Kamalesh is my one of the instructors or teachers and of yoga there, and keeping me on track and reminding me to stay on track. So I really appreciate you for that, and I think that you have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share with us, not just about yoga, but about life. That's why I wanted to invite you here to share some of your life of experiences. And again, not just in yoga, I think that we learn so much about life just by living it in general. And there's so much wisdom that comes out of life flailing about throughout this journey of life. So thank you for
Amen.
for coming here to have a conversation with me. I know I just read that introduction, but I also like for guests to kind of introduce themselves outside of the script and see how you feel about yourself today.
Well, today I just came back. I came back this week from being on the mountain and visiting in California. And first, I think I'm so lucky that I have two such beautiful places in which to be.
Mm.
The Santa Cruz Mountains and the coastline of California. And then here, literally, I'm on a volcano. Antigua is surrounded by three volcanoes, and I'm on the one that we hope is not active. As long as history, we don't think it's active, right? But
All
there's a
right.
couple of us villages on this volcano. So, um, yeah, I just feel fortunate, just fortunate of having two really beautiful, beautiful visually, and of course, wonderfully nice people. I remember when I first moved to California with my children, the people would go, "How did the kids adjusting to life in the States?" And I went, "Life at Mount Madonna is not life in the States.
I know, right?
Living in a yoga ashram is not the same."
No.
Yeah, it was more like a life here in Guatemala. Uh,
Nice. Yeah. Well, I like that as an introduction. Yeah, being appreciative and grateful for being able to be in beautiful places, both in the mountains. One not on a non-active volcano. But yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. And I like to ask this question from the very beginning. What does living well mean to you, or what is a life worth living? And then we'll unpack it and explore from there.
We talked about this briefly when we saw each other at the center a few weeks back, and of course, the question goes over in my mind, and I think I had to go back to sort of Babaji's peace, right? Just peace with a capital P, just
Mm,
finding those peaceful moments. And as I age, it means simple things like a really good night's sleep, and asking myself if I've been kind all day to myself and to everyone else who was in my path, and sharing, really sharing, with no expectations of something coming back. Sharing the wisdom, sharing food, sharing our resources, just sharing things that you have in the day. My business here is I have 55 women who work at my restaurant, and
oh, wow.
if I were to ask them the same question, I think it would also just be peace within their family structure. Family is so important down here, right? And being able to take care of their families financially, and just watching people develop. I feel really lazy as I'm getting older, because I find that things that I used to do just because people wanted me to do them, I don't really do them that much anymore. I
Good.
have to really want to do it myself. I have no problem with the no word.
Mhm.
Where before I was a people pleaser, and if somebody asked me to go, well, of course I was going to try to go. And I must admit that's still the case. If somebody who I really love and appreciate wants me to go, even though I don't want to go, I'll go, because I'm going
Mm.
for them, because I love and appreciate them. But it's really a lot easier for me to say, instead of dinner, could we do lunch? I'm not really good with a big dinner. So yeah, just finding those little ways of finding peace in each moment. Peace. And then when you don't have peace, because that's a good thing to look at, when there is no peace, like when you are waking up in the middle of the night, asking myself, why am I not sleeping well? Maybe it was something I ate. Maybe it was some bad thought I went to bed with, right? Something that was negative that happened, or maybe in the middle of the night, we're big on fireworks here. Maybe there was a whole stream of fireworks, and I just kind of put it into my dream, and it was gunshots and everything else. And so trying to find what's upsetting your peace. Why can't you find it? Why can't you go back to that moment of
Mhm.
deep breathing? And yeah, I think my practice too, really, the daily practice of yoga, which, as you know, I don't necessarily mean asana, because some days I'll do asana and some days I won't do asana, the postures. But I always have to have my breathing and my meditation. Those are the important factors that I can't do without. And I think it stabilizes me through the day, and it helps me just create a more peaceful path. Like every once in a while, if the alarm didn't go off and I have to like get up and go out and teach, my whole day is discombobulated if I didn't have my hour and a half to myself.
Mhm.
If that makes any sense. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
I think,
totally.
what if you wake up every morning and you're just glad to be alive? And that's still the case for me. I wake up every morning and I'm really just glad to be alive, which means I have another day to do good work, right? Um, yeah.
Awesome. We're gonna unpack that. There was a lot of lovely things there you shared, and starting off with peace, and yeah, we'd like to explore a little bit more of that. Being kind, sharing without expectations of something reward in return, which can be challenging in our society. I'm finding that challenging because that's essentially what I want to do. I just want to share the stuff that I do, and not have to worry about the financial reward for it. or the reward is not the best word. I mean, word I really want to use right now, but this um, I don't know where I can't think of it right now. But yeah, I find that that's hard. That's hard when you have to pay bills and you have to do all these different things. When you just really want to just give and share and be in community and sharing. But it's so important to the good life. I 100% agree with you on that. And being in family, community, and the benefits of that, being in community with others and stressing family and connection with others, practicing on a regular basis and how that grounds you and supports your capacity to live a good life, and being excited that you're alive when you wake up in the morning and happy that you are um, alive. That's those are all positive aspects of um, or important pieces, I think, along with you, that important pieces of the good life. So let's unpack some of those. Let's start with peace, the thing you started with first. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that? I know you said a little bit about it, but can you say a little bit more about what peace is and how do we get that peace? What can we do to facilitate more peace in our lives?
Well, you remember that you're talking to the Samkhya teacher here,
I know, right?
which, for those of you who don't know, that's it's a philosophy, one of the six philosophies of India, of like how we came into existence, and it helps us to remember. And I won't give you the whole philosophical content right now, but it helps us remember that we are not this body, we are not our mind, we are beyond that. And there is that concept of consciousness. And the consciousness itself is eternal and exists outside of the plane of this physical manifestation that we have right now. And so peace isn't being there because we're there when we're not physical, but peace is recognizing that we are that unified consciousness, and I am you, and you are me, and he is she, and we are all together. The Beatles said it so beautifully, right? It's 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 that recognition that in Namaste, the light in me recognizes and sees the light in you, that light in your eyes. I see that, right?
Mm,
And with that knowledge, I find peace, even if it can be upsetting because maybe what I see in you I feel is negative, but that's also in me. It's the realization that the good in me is also in you, and
mm,
we share that eternal machat, that space where we're all a sea of consciousness. We share that, and I think it's just the knowledge and the recognition that there is a peaceful place to be. And it's definitely not in our bodies as they age. And it's often not in our mind. If it's looking for those little tiny spaces in between the thoughts, in between the breath, that help us remember that we are so beyond that.
mm.
That
Yeah.
peace is just the recognition that I am that, and that is that supra consciousness. I am that. That I am. Soham and Hamsa, which are ancient yogic mantras, just
Mm,
reminding us every moment that I am that. I'm not this, not what you see. I am that.
mm,
And you are. And you are
mhm,
that, right?
mm,
So as long as we are remembering that various times throughout the day, I think that leads to a state of mind that is peaceful.
mhm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, reminding ourselves and that we are not the fluctuations of the mind. We are not the body. We're not simply any of that. We extend beyond that as what they call the self, the big self, the self with a
Hmm.
big capital S. Yeah, not our ego, not our identifiers, our set of identifiers um, that we relate to as our self with the small s, but this bigger self that extends beyond all of that. Yeah.
And in Sankhya, we often translate the word ahankar, which just means separate.
Mm-hmm.
Ahankar. I am action. I am separate. I am separating myself. It doesn't mean the Freudian ego, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
all of these things that are in our mind. That's more mental, right? This is beyond that. And it's that remembering that the separateness doesn't do us any favors. That's
Yeah.
how we're living, but it's that remembering that we are not separate, that we really are together. And when you see someone who's in need, that's you. That's you. Maybe not at that exact moment, but if you're in a position where you can share something with that person, I remember somebody asking me why I gave this man I give money to because he drinks. And I said, if I was in his condition, I might drink too. I mean, he's
Mm-hmm.
got cerebral palsy. He can barely walk. He's on his crutches, and every once in a while, and it takes him about 2 hours to go from the bus lets him off to the Central Park where he begs for money.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't, he's not drunk every day, but he goes on binges, right? Maybe once every 2 or 3 months. Who knows what I would do? It's like that saying that we have in the South, there, but for the grace of God go I. That's what I
Yes.
think. There, but for the grace of God go I. And if I don't know, if I were in his body with all of his trials and tribulations, maybe I'd drink occasionally too. I don't know. So I'm not to
Mm-hmm.
judge. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I do see myself in even the negative people that come banging on your window and want to wash your car window. That doesn't happen in the States, but it happens here all the time. And I'll go, no, 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 don't wash the window. But I'll often roll the window down and give them some money just because, but I don't want them washing and making my window all streaky weird. Yeah, there are a lot of
Yeah.
things that happen down here on the streets that don't happen in the States. It's kind of, it's an education in itself. Yeah.
Right. Right. Oh, beautiful, beautiful example too. Again, that we're not this distinction. And thank you for making that clarification. I usually don't, just out of this for simplicity's sake. But I'm glad you did because I was about to say Hunkar, and I'm like, I better not say that. People don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but a
But
hunkar is different,
it's
right? A
different.
hung. Uh huh.
Uh-huh. You're right.
Yeah.
It's definitely different. It's this idea of I am a distinction. And then once we make that distinction, and then we pile on all these different identifiers, and we get stuck with I am all of these different things because it
Right.
started off with that first initial thought
I
that
am separate.
I am separate, I am distinct
I
from
am action.
everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that
Mm-hmm.
that leads to it can lead to all kinds of suffering as a result of that
It
when we
certainly can.
and we forget who we are. And you threw in this. Well, I'll say this too because I think this is related to this contentment, this peace. When having that sense of contentment, and that contentment comes along with that awareness, with that knowledge. A lot of people talk about it as awakening. When we awaken to that realization that I'm not just simply the things of this world, prakriti, the mind, the body, and all of these different things. I am the spirit, and we're all, are expressions of this spirit. And having that realization, that awakening, it can bring about peace when we remind ourselves of it every day. That's that contentment that we can practice every day. I can be content because I know that this phrase of these two shall pass. I can say that with grace. I'm like, these two shall pass because I know I'm not this. I'm not this moment. I'm not all of the different things that are happening in my life. There's something that extends beyond that. And I can have that contentment, that peace, if I remind myself of that on a regular basis.
Often in yoga therapy, one of the tasks I'll ask someone to do is practice santosha, contentment, every day,
Mm-hmm.
and just make it a practice that when they put their feet on the floor, that they take a few moments to just bring their hands to their heart and be grateful for three things. Maybe it's that I have food on the table for breakfast in a little while. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's a sunny day. Maybe it's a rainy day. Maybe I'm grateful that I remembered to iron my shirt for work. Whatever it is, how simple it is, but just practicing contentment for a moment before you rush into the whole day,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't take a moment to be grateful. It's also, I think, other people call a gratitude practice, being
Yeah.
grateful for what you have, being content with what you have. I always
Mm-hmm.
open once I'm up and at it, the first thing I do is throw back the curtains over here on my window and make sure the other two volcanoes are still exactly like I left them yesterday. And I'm content for seeing that. It makes me so happy to see the same volcanoes right there, the same way, Fuego puffing along, and Acatenango just solid, So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
funny how those little things make you content.
Yeah, those are those things that remind us. I think there's this different avenues and ways of approaching something like contentment, or this idea of peace. And you gave another example how you can do that, by practicing a gratitude practice, like you say, some people refer to this as gratitude practice. But in the world, recognizing that I am grateful to have a roof over my head, and that moment of being content with that in that moment and reflecting on that, when I do that, it's almost like a mind trick where it allows me to have a moment of experience of peace, a moment in that moment where I'm not wanting.
Mm-hmm.
There's no desire right there in that moment when I say, I'm grateful for this. I have no desire. And then I can let go of my fixation on I am this stuff. I am this distinction. It's almost like we trick ourselves to go beyond the distinction for a moment, and then we forget a lot of times. That's why we need practice to constantly remind ourselves that we're not that. Um,
Truly. Uh-huh.
and have a
It,
framework, something like Sankhya, whatever. It may not be Sankhya, whatever philosophical
yeah.
framework can be useful in helping us guide us in that process. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the yoga practices that I've learned, and I know you've learned, are tools. They're amazing tools.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes people will say, "Are you? Do you? Is your meditation Buddhist?" No, my meditation is just meditation.
Right.
And not only Buddhists meditate.
I know.
yoga, Gautam Buddha was a yogi, right?
I
And
know.
so the concept of meditation is way before Buddhism. It's just that moment of connection, that moment of really trying to quieten the mind and find that moment of peace in your day. And of course, all the tools of yoga, whether it be practicing the yamas or the niyamas, the restraints, these are like our foundational principles of being good in the world. One of them is to make you a good citizen in the world, and one is to make you a good person internally in the world, right? And
Mm-hmm.
those 10 principles, to follow those can be a practice, you know. And then we have the practices of breath that really help us to get in touch with our physical body, to go beyond the physical body, and the practice of asanas to make it comfortable to sit for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the practices, then we start the internal practices of starting to look where we're going to go. Are we going to are we going to concentrate? Are we going to meditate? Are we going to go into samadhi, into transcendental area, right? And all of that's great and good, but really we're looking for peace. And if you find it at any of those steps, you can stop there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be able to put your leg around your neck to be a yogi. The minute, as Babaji would say, the minute you want to become a better person, you have started the practice of yoga.
Yes. Hmm. I love that. I think that that's a big, it can be a discussion out here about what yoga is. And some people like now, especially post pandemic, are talking about yoga is not just asana. I'm like, well, that's been known for a long time. Yoga is not just meditation either.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's bhakti, it's devotion. Yoga is not just devotion. Oh, Krishna said this,
It's
this.
so
I'm like,
enormous.
it is. And that's what I love about Babaji's teachings, in that once you start to get on the path of trying to better yourself and find peace, then you're on a path of yoga, and that could be anything. It could be things that we've learned in the contemporary world. It doesn't have to be, I'm doing this meditation that's 2,000 years old. I'm like, whatever, that doesn't matter. A lot of times that's just, you're patting yourself on the back, or you're again clinging to your identity as like, I'm a yogi and I do these old classical practices. I'm like, and you're still a jerk. I'm like, well, I don't know if it's working.
Right.
I think, well, I shouldn't say that because I can be a jerk sometimes. Not, I'm not a mean person. I do nothing harmful to people, but I can have a little attitude if um, I'm in a funky mood or something, and someone tap me on my shoulder, and I snap around. I'm like, leave me alone. Even if I don't say it verbally, I give them that look, and I'm like, well, that wasn't necessary. But I was just
Mm-hmm.
having a bad moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's not about being perfect, but we work when we strive to do better and to acknowledge, like, yeah, I didn't have to frown. Why did I
Mm-hmm.
have to frown right there? And I think the practice reminds us that it's an ongoing process of to stick with this idea, this theme of peace, of finding peace in our lives, because we are in this mind body and it has a history, and there are patterns of habits of samskaras that are latent, that are in there, that's going to come to fruition, and it can cause us to do things we don't necessarily want to do. But we can work through all of that stuff through practice on a regular basis. Now, so you said something too about you slipped in there sharing, and about sharing with this person that has apparently a lot of suffering going on, and they tend to drink a lot, and that's probably directly related to their suffering, as you say. But you still can find a way to share it with them, and you kind of subtly mentioned there why that is so important, and um, why you share, and why say should, why it would behoove us to share with others, and why it makes sense to share with others. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I guess because I grew up in the South with some of the church beliefs there, right?
Mm-hmm.
10% of what you have goes back to the church. And since I'm not, well, I do support the church here in the village, but um, I feel like I should share with everyone, right? Like, so I should, if I, if the restaurant does really well, I give bonuses. I don't grab it myself and decide I'm going to Europe for the week, you know. Um, my employees can tell you that I'm super generous with bonuses because it's off. They're the ones who actually earned the money. They're
Mm-hmm.
the ones who helped the sales. They're the ones who did it, you know. And so I want to share that extra with them because I love them. They're wonderful women. And um, and also I think just when I do see poverty in the street. And this is, you know, like, well, even in California. California, I'd come out of the thing of Target and there's always a vet standing there with this asking for some money. Well, I really appreciate what he did, putting his life on the line and going out, and he obviously doesn't have any government support, or he wouldn't be there begging for money. And so I always give money. I don't care what he does with the money, but I, I have it. I give it. You know, I keep money in my car to give away. Don't tell that to the
Beautiful.
whole world. But I always have, like, you know, like here we have quetzales. I'll always have, you know, 10 quetzal billetes or 20 quetzal billetes. What do you call it? Bills to just to give away when the time is right. And I do the same thing in the States. I just keep some extra change around because sometimes it's like $5 and a smile can make their morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even $1 and a smile, a recognition of the person who they are. And when I do pass the beggars and I'm not carrying any money because I ran to the telephone company or whatever, I still greet them and say, "Good morning. How are you? Nice to see you this morning." because they all know me now, after a million years of living here. So, and they're people, not just beggars. So, yeah,
Yeah.
sharing, 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 And then
Mm.
when people come, how exciting is it to share food with them? I mean, it's that to me is such a blessing that all of us who love to cook get to share food with other people. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because we make things and put love in it and caring in it, and we get to share that food, and we maybe get to sit at the table and eat with them. Even if not, I loved it. I love it that the restaurant we're sharing food. It is so full of love. It is so full of love. Those women in the upstairs prep kitchen are amazing, and I know, and I'm proud of what they share with the public. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sharing is caring. I think that
Right?
was a saying on a Hallmark card.
I know. I was about to say that exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. I think before you mentioned about we were enticed to share because we realized that that person is me. That person is beyond not Broderick, but that person we all share the same spirit, and therefore I want to share. And then you mentioned again here just the pleasure of sharing. There's something innately that moves us in that direction to want to share with others. And I think that's just a part of that's been a part of our evolution. We're social creatures. And I do think that there's something innately in us that can be now it can be dampened by the story uh, that we've adopted. But I do think we have a natural inclination to want to mitigate suffering in the world, unless we've been traumatized and we've got some weird education and a conditioning that facilitates us doing crazy stuff. There are people who end up doing crazy stuff in the world
It just
because of
made
their
me
education.
remember when you said like some crazy trauma. Just don't take food off my plate. Because as a kid growing up with my grandfather, I was always hungry, right? And so
Mm,
I didn't want. I ate everything on my plate, and if somebody else offered me more, I would usually have it. And to this day, because of that trauma of being hungry as a kid, if you take food off my plate without asking, and sometimes even if you ask and I have it earmarked, I'm like, nope.
right?
Now, that's if you're at my table and there's plenty of food, right? But if
Hmm.
we were out somewhere and someone else asked me for food, or if I saw someone hungry, and I might take half of my sandwich and take it to them when I leave. But it's that trauma that makes us sometimes act out of unreasonable circumstances, right? Like, that's so
Hmm.
silly that what happened 60 years ago and 70 years ago is still affecting me on a day, like being stingy about the food on my plate as opposed to wanting to share the food on my plate as well. If you wanted to taste what I ordered, please taste what I ordered. Which is
Hmm.
why I like to go to restaurants with people that we can order family style. And we can all
Hmm.
serve ourselves a little bit of everything, and nobody has to ask me for what's on my plate.
Right, right. I feel you. I understand that,
That's
and
part of my humanness.
exactly. And that's what I was getting at earlier. We have these, in yoga, we talk about some scars. We have these habits that were ingrained in us and based on our experiences. Folks, our brain, for instance, just our physical brains is an expression of our experiences. Every experience that we've had, and if we've had that experience multiple times, or if that experience was very intense, it's much more hardwired into our nervous system.
And our
And
ancestral all wired
oh,
in there too.
exactly. And we have these habits of mind and patterns just from a physical. If you're just a purely physicalist, which I am definitely not, but if you are, you can talk about this in purely physical terms or biological terms if you want. But it's we do have all those different patterns that we're constantly working through. And I think that in the yogic tradition, they talk about the various samskaras from lifetime to lifetime, and even in Jungian psychology, talks about the collective unconscious and the various habits of mind that influences or impinging on each one of us. That's that. You can think about that in terms of ancestral patterns and habits that we've all inherited in some capacity. We're working through all of those different things. That's why which I was going to ask you now, is this idea of regular practice. This is why we practice, because I might have a moment of peace, but it's very difficult to just be at peace all the time. There's a relative sense of like, okay, I'm relatively at peace with life. When someone says that, I get where they're coming from, but those moments of just stillness and spaciousness all the time, I doubt very many human beings have even ever done that. But I think there's reasons for that, and that's why people like Babaji, Master Yogi, you ask him, "What do you do when you're enlightened?" He's just like, "Well, you keep practicing. You keep practicing. So, what's the best thing to do? Keep practicing." And I think a big part of that is we're constantly evolving and developing and healing along in this life, and it requires a regular practice to have that steady peace that we all desire. Yeah,
Yeah, sustaining,
yeah,
sustaining. And even if we really are only aware of it a couple of times in a day, we're still so fortunate that we are aware of it
yeah.
a couple of times a
Exactly.
day. And it may be like I have to do my practice as soon as I get up. I oil and then I sit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if my day starts, it's then I can find a million excuses.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing right before I'm ready to go to bed. I just have to take 10 or 15 minutes to just reflect and be. And that when usually I'm sitting in my bed with my legs crossed, just sitting up there, because it's comfortable. But just those few moments of peace during the day where you really are just letting whatever happened wash over you and come back to it if you need to. I do find that if something in the evening, if I remember something that happened in the day that was negative, that I didn't resolve in that moment, that I probably need to resolve it the next day, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes any sense. Not let it fester. Because, and it can be something like an apology, or maybe not even an apology. Today it was before I rushed out of the house while I was still oiled, having practice, getting ready to take my shower, called the young woman who works here and thanked her for leaving my shower so clean because it was so. It'd been 2 days now that I've been showering in that shower, and I never said a word to her. It hasn't been that clean in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I mean, every single thing that I leave around the whole tub and shower was clean, but just I hadn't recognized that in her. And so last night when I went to bed, I said, tomorrow morning I'm going to let her know, right? And that was I had that resolution and I did it, because you can go to bed with something and remember and remind yourself that in the morning that you need to rectify something that you did that you could have done better, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think it's so hard for so many people to say I'm sorry or I forgot
Mm-hmm.
or I didn't mean to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and including those forgiveness words in our vocabulary can lead a long way to peace within oneself. Hopefully, creating peace within the other person as well. But in relationship, at least the peace you've offered it. You've tried to rectify what you know was inappropriate
Mm-hmm.
or just
Beautiful.
missing. You just didn't do it.
Yeah, beautiful. See, folks, this is a good life. It's not. We talked about. Me mentioned peace, and I guess I just fumbling around trying to try to bring this out as well. Is it's not, again, it's not about having it all the time. It's about having the awareness when I wasn't. I guess you did mention at the beginning. When am I not at peace? That's really important. When am I? Can I have the awareness to catch myself gauging in certain habits or ways of thinking that I could probably not be thinking that way. There are other ways that are better for me. Or if I like I said mentioned earlier, I frowned at someone. How do I my partner? We're all we both work out of the house, so we're here together all the time. And when I'm focused on something, when I do it to her too, we always, when you're focused doing something, someone comes taps you on the shoulder like, I'm so into what I'm doing, don't bother me. I might frown. And then I'll tell her later, I'm like, no, I didn't mean to frown at you. I didn't. But having that awareness and being able to go back and say it, being able to go back and say, oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah. I'm
And I
sorry I
think
frowned at you. I was using my weirdo face.
exactly,
I love you.
exactly,
Please know that that wasn't intentional. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like, that's just a part of it. I think we forget that. I think sometimes, I think when I first started practicing yoga, even I think I was practicing yoga before I started actual yoga, many years ago. And I was like, I want to be the perfect person, basically. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to harm nobody. I just want pure peace. And so I'm pushing myself. I'm experimenting with all kinds of stuff, diets, and yeah, I did a lot of stuff. And over the years, I'm like, damn, I'm still a jerk. I'm not a bad person, no. But I'm like, oh wow, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I thought I can erase it all. I thought I can get rid of all of the habits of mine that leads to suffering in my life. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. That's not what it
No, our
is.
humanness.
Exactly.
No.
You can't get rid of it.
Uh huh.
That's why I'm like, that's why I've said this numerous times on this podcast, especially when I talk to people who are yogis or people who are in any kind of spiritual tradition, that sometimes in this idea of enlightenment, it's overrated. Because at the end of the day, what's really important, what a rubber meets the road, is how virtuous am I living? You know,
How well do you walk in the world?
exactly. That's where the rubber meets the road. And yeah, you might be enlightened. Now, I really personally don't care. What I'm
Mm-hmm.
really interested in is how are you showing up? How
Mm-hmm.
am I showing up in the moment? And when I show up in a way that I don't like, and I try to rectify in some capacity, to me, I feel like okay, I'm doing okay. I have a sense of peace in my life. I might be torn up inside about like, damn, I shouldn't have said that, or I'm like, I could have said that differently, and I have to wait a few days before I can see that person the next time and apologize, for instance. But it weighs on me. Even when it's weighing on me for 2 days, I'm still like, you know what? And it doesn't feel good. I'm like, you know what? I'm at peace with life because I recognize I'm not on my high horse. I don't think I'm some enlightened being. I don't think I have it all figured out. And yeah, I like when I have moments of stillness. Right now, it doesn't feel good because I have my internal processing is um, working out something that I said I probably shouldn't have said, or it didn't come out, or maybe someone misinterpreted something that I said, and so I'm over here ruminating about it, and I'm not feeling the best about it. About it, to me, I'm happy that I'm able to do that. Now, I don't need to sit and ruminate and torture myself about it. And I don't want to go extreme, but the fact that I can see and recognize, I hate that I did it in the first place, but the fact that I can recognize it and try to do something about it and see it as a way for me to better myself, then I think I'm doing all right.
As a
I think
lesson
I'm all right.
and not do the
Yeah,
same thing again, right?
exactly. At least
Yeah,
try not to.
right, right.
Depends on how strong that some scar, how well etched it is in us, boy. Um,
Well, it's
sometimes things
all
just come out.
in yoga, it's all boga,
Mm-hmm.
experience for
Yeah,
apavarga, liberation. And so without
exactly.
these physical bodies, without these brilliant minds we have, we wouldn't be having these experiences over and over again. And no experience, you're already liberated, Om
Exactly.
Swaha, there you are. So we're having these experiences to liberate our soul, our very soul.
Yeah, I love it, Kamalesh. Yeah, yeah, these are beautiful things. I try to stress that on this podcast. On, I don't want folks to think that they have to be perfect beings, and
No such thing.
I
Maybe there
know.
were, but even all the saints, they refer to themselves as human.
Yeah.
And Babaji, when he would do something, often he would say, "We are so beyond body and mind. Our
Mm-hmm.
eternal essence is so
Mm-hmm.
beyond body and mind."
Yeah. Exactly. Good stuff. Good stuff. And you also talked about family and community. Can you say a little bit more about why that's so crucial to a good life?
I think we're communal beings. I think we are pack animals. I think we need other people, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think there are people who don't. I think they really have like been around several times of the wheel, and their some scars are peeling off and burning up, and those are the people that we find in monasteries that are just praying for all of us day in and day out, but they
Mm-hmm.
have that community of a monastery. And then
Yep.
you go into the mountains of the Himalayas and you find yogis that are there watching for their one temple, like Babaji was for 7 years, just them in the temple. But then they have people that are coming all the time and appreciating the deity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think even when we think we're solitary, we're still dependent upon other people in our range. We're still doing things. We may go off the grid. That's a pretty big thing now, going off the grid. But a lot of people are going off the grid in these big, often negative communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need one another. And I think we create families. We don't necessarily have to stay with a family that we were given. Um, we can create a family. Like people at Mount Madonna often create a family within that community. The people within the community have been living there for so many years, all are like brothers and sisters. They fight, they make up, everything comes back together. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the things we're not used to is commitment, right?
Yeah.
Family and commitment. And there has to be a certain degree of commitment to community or family, not just when the going gets rough, you leave, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a samskar that many people have had in their lives. People have had their parents leave because the going got tough, and their grandparents leave because the going got tough, and 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 their brothers and sisters leave because the going got tough in a household. And so when we don't grow up with that knowledge of commitment, right? And if we don't have that as a role model, it's really hard, right? It's really hard. And for me, it had to be a decision to say I was going to stay in a relationship, hell or high water, right? Because you leave one and then you look at the other, and the same issues are right there. Every single, all you're doing is looking at yourself in a friggin' mirror every single time. And
Mm-hmm.
so that community helps us look quicker. A permanent relationship, two people together forming a relationship with commitment, helps us look together at our innermost being. Babaji would say a marriage is sadhana. It really
Mm-hmm.
is. Just getting through the day to day and keeping it together is its own sadhana, making that marriage the third thing, and you're both creating and giving to the marriage, right? So like for the community too, like making sure that you're creating for the community, like that you're committed, that you're giving, that you're not the only one in the carpool that says, well, it's my day, but can you cover for me? It's like you're in
Mm-hmm.
there covering for other people as well, not just
Mm-hmm.
taking from the community. So I think it's a real commitment. And I think because we've had more and more as this 20th century, 21st century develops, we're having less signs of true commitment. Where's the
Mm-hmm.
commitment right now in our government for the poor people? Whoop, out the window, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no commitment to our values and our mission as humans. And that's very sad, very, very
Yep.
sad. We
Mm-hmm.
won't go into that whole political thing right
Oh
now. We can have
no,
another podcast on that
we can
piece.
definitely start a whole new podcast talking about virtue and virtuous living, character and politics.
Yeah, but I think community
Yeah,
requires commitment. I think
yeah,
relationship requires commitment, and you can't just be looking out for you. I think if you're in a relationship and somebody's abusive, get the heck out,
yeah,
right? But other than that, you're just going to find the same issues with other people.
yeah,
Same issues.
yeah. Thank you for saying that. And I think we forget that. Community is fun, it's great, but also community is hard. That's the good life. Life, it's both, and it's like you say, bogus experience. And when we're in community, we get to see ourselves. It's like it's right there in front of our face. The various challenges. We get to learn so much about what it means to be a human being. Oh yeah, when you're in your family, you're challenged. Like that old saying, if you think you're enlightened, go back home to be with your family. Because when you're in your family, how committed I am to these people, and how committed I am to the relationship, not to commit it to them as I'm going to subsume myself to each one of those folks and do whatever they want me to do. No, I'm not saying that. What we're saying is you're committed to the interaction. You're committed to trying to make the relationship work. You to make in the sense of having that connection, reminding ourselves that we're interconnected. We're interconnected. We are interdependent. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And when we're in community, we bump up against those challenges, but those challenges can facilitate growth. It actually can facilitate liberation, more freedom. And but it doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's easy, folks. The good life is not necessarily easy. No one is saying that. And I know I stress that a lot on this podcast because I don't, just because life can be hard doesn't mean that it can't be good.
Amen.
I don't think you can escape it. I don't think you can escape the challenges of life. And I'm sorry, folks. I'm not going to sit here and say I have some magic breathing exercise. There's a lot of shit out there like that, and it just drives me crazy. In the wellness world, I have this thing and this exercise. If you build muscle mass, and if you do this and you do that, and I know people are doing it for marketing purposes to sell, um, but there is no one solution that's going to fix all your problems. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. You're going to have problems. You're just going to learn how to manage those problems better,
And
and
you're
you're
going
going
to use
to
tools, and you're going to get some
exactly
tools. Yeah.
and you're going to be better at managing. You're going to also mitigate certain kinds of problems. You can avoid certain kinds of unnecessary suffering. But I don't think you're going to get rid of all discomfort out of your life. But you can still have a good life in the process. It doesn't mean you just give up. Just like you were saying in relationships. When you're in relationships with other people, yeah, if it's abusive and it gets to the point where it's like, no, this is unhealthy. This is not conducive to um, any
Living.
life, yeah, living. Period. It's not worth living. But if it's just because you know what, I don't know, Broderick frowned at me, I want to leave him. Like yeah, you can do that, but I'm like, why did I frown? Where did that come from? And what's happening? Is that am I always frowning? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Asking those questions and really exploring is an opportunity to learn and to gain some insight about yourself. And I think ultimately overcome any patterns or habits of mind that are um, restraining us and imprisoning us. Um, Being in community, boy, and being in relationships, boy, it really is right there in your face. There's no there's no running away.
Amen. Hmm.
It's right there. Yeah, and I love how you said that. In community like at Mount Madonna, you fight with your family, and then you make up.
It's
Hopefully, you
a
learn something in the
microcosm of
process,
the macrocosm. There's,
right?
people think, oh, I'm coming to this beautiful ashram yoga center where everyone's peace and joy and happiness. And then they find out that it's the same as the world, right? It's
Right.
there, there's ups and downs, and there's ins and there's
Mm-hmm.
outs, and people get mad and people get hurt, and you
Mm-hmm.
just have to keep staying in it and just staying in it and staying in it.
Yeah. And learning and growing and becoming a better person in the process. We
Hopefully.
become, hopefully, yeah, hopefully, if
Yeah.
we are engaged in the practice, if we're
And committed.
engaged and committed to this, not just to the community, but committed to virtuous living, to being a
Committed
virtuous
to the
person.
process of living a good life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so good. I know we're coming to an end here. I about to say Kamalesh, Ginger. I use those interchangeably. And yeah, it's been lovely to unpack some of these things that you mentioned. I'm going to round off a few of them at the end here. You can say a few words, and yeah, just to top this off. So kindness. What can you say about kindness? You mentioned that earlier.
Just being nice to people as
Mm-hmm.
much as you possibly can. And I, my new thing when I'm out of this, we call it out on the street here in La Calle, out in the street, is smile at everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And some people will just look at you like you're crazy, and some people here, mostly everybody smiles back. But in the States, I did it too when I was there for those 3 weeks, and some people smile back, and some people just ugh.
All
But
right.
some people they were walking toward you and they were worried. You could see on their faces they were worried, and if you give them a really big smile and either good morning or good afternoon, you can just watch the worry just for. I'm sure it came back 3 steps later, but
Mm-hmm.
it gave them a moment of, oh, I'm a person.
Mm, a moment of peace. Wow. Another one. You didn't say the word, I don't think, but you pretty much hinted at it. Compassion, having compassion for others. What can you say
Yeah,
about
just realize you're not in anybody else's moccasins, right? You don't know what they've gone through that day. Maybe they got to work and they were 10 minutes late, and you don't know that they had a fight with 3 of their 4 kids. You don't know what happened, and you don't know why they're in a mood. And so, before you do anything, just have compassion.
that? Mm-hmm.
Just understand, put yourself maybe not in their complete, maybe you don't know even enough about them, maybe you think you know them. This is the thing where you think you know them and then you find out you really don't. And so don't
Mm-hmm.
assume, and show compassion for everyone who's in your path.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. You talked about from the beginning when you're talking about yourself, you feel lucky to be in these two beautiful places, nature and beauty, and what role does beauty and nature play in all of this?
Just finding a place to walk or sit in a tree or sit under a tree, or just a little bit of time, like if you have a choice and you can go out to lunch outside, or if you have a choice and you can do something that just puts your feet in the dirt, just something that helps Mother Earth and all of the plants that surround us be a part of you, because we are all of the same Gaia. We really are the
Mm-hmm.
same, from the same stuff. We're all made of the 5 elements, all of us. So
Mm-hmm.
just taking it to nature. And if you can't because it's cold and wet and terrible where you are, at least surround yourself with things that remind you of nature. And maybe it's as simple as like make yourself a most beautiful nature screensaver, so that every time you get between something, you can just sit there and go back to like looking at the Poconos, or looking at different mountains, seeing just something
Mm-hmm.
that's beautiful for you to look at in between Zoom meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Finding, if you can't get nature, bring it to you.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I was just seeing something yesterday, I think. I don't know. I was on my Instagram page, and it's someone I know that actually who I've interviewed here, and they posted something about artists, and they're like, nature is the original artist, and they just showing a bunch of photos of just beautiful landscape, and in the right up here in the Northwest, just beautiful. And how when you talked about peace, and how when you're out there, when you sit still amongst those trees, and especially in the mountain. I'm a mountain person, so other people might be more ocean coast, that. But in the mountains, it's just so peaceful, so calming and soothing. You're talking about contentment. You're like, okay, I can make it. I can take the next step just by just being out in nature and sitting still for a moment. Yeah, so awesome.
Yeah, I have a tree that I can sit in, so that's really
Oh,
grounding and a really beautiful feeling. Yeah.
mm, that's awesome. Are there big trees there where you are? Is it It's not quite jungle because you're at 5,000 feet. What is it like there?
5,000, yeah. There are humongous trees. This ceiba is
Okay.
our national tree, and it is
Mm,
humongous. I have
mm.
jocote, which is a fruit tree in the yard, and it grows really weird things like that. And mine happens to have a little seat where you just can sit right in it and lean your head back and read a book.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, Kamalesh, this has been awesome. we had about an hour. Are there? It's just so many things you brought up, and I stumbled along trying to elaborate on some of those things. Are there any other things you would like to share with the audience before we sign off here?
Just to remember that you are so beautiful inside, and the first person that with whom you practice kindness is yourself.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much. This has been lovely, and I hope we do something like this again where we can actually just talk about Ayurveda or break down yoga or something like that. That would be a lot of fun.
I'd love that,
Uh,
Broderick.
I appreciate you. I love you dearly. You're an amazing person, and I'm very grateful that you're able to come here and share with the rest of the world your knowledge, wisdom, beauty, and grace. And we're both from the South, and I love that accent. I just love it, and it's just good to have you here. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Broderick. Appreciate you. Love you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.